Hi everyone, Irina Ninen, thank you for joining us. Turkey's military operation against Kurdish fighters in northern Syria is underway right now. 2 jets took off from an air base in southeastern Turkey earlier today. Witnesses on the ground said they could hear the planes flying overhead. Smoke was also seen rising along the Turkish-Syrian border, and there were reports of several large explosions. U.S. officials confirm airstrikes in the region, but say that there is no coordination with Turkey on any air operations. Officials also said the U.S. will defend its troops on the ground with no intention to shoot down the aircraft. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan confirmed on Twitter that the military assault had begun, and he said the goal, destroy the terror corridor, which is trying to be established on our southern border, and to bring peace to the region. This all comes after President Trump announced a drawdown of U.S. forces in northeastern Syria on Monday. Mr. Trump has defended the action, reiterating previous calls to bring our troops home. The White House has been accused of turning its back on Kurdish fighters there to make way for the Turkish incursion. You may recall, the Kurds have been one of our strongest allies in the fight against ISIS. But just hours after making the announcement, the president said that U.S. troops were no longer needed in Syria to fight ISIS.
We'll tell you this, though. We defeated ISIS. And when we were at 96 and 95 and 97%, I sort of said, let the other countries in the area finish it off. And I was met with a lot of anger from some people in our country.
Well, one of Mr. Trump's most loyal allies, Senator Lindsey Graham, has been critical of the president's decision to pull back troops and broke with the claim that ISIS has been defeated.
Well, it's a lie that that ISIS has been defeated. The caliphate's been destroyed, but it will reemerge. You know, the Kurds can't fight Turkey and control ISIS at the same time.
Holly Williams and Bulent Aliriza join me now. Holly's a CBS News foreign correspondent, and Bulent is the founding director of the Turkey Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Holly, boy, it's so great to have you on set. You're based in this region. You know this very well. What are you hearing about the Turkish military operation?
Yeah, so what we understand is that the incursion or the invasion of Syria began earlier today. We're hearing reports of shelling of areas around the town of Tal Abyad, as well as airstrikes. As you were saying, let's be really clear about what's going on here. Essentially, the U.S. has greenlit this invasion by Turkey, and the people they're attacking are this Kurdish-dominated group known as the Syrian Democratic Forces, or the SDF. When the U.S. went looking for a partner to defeat ISIS on the ground in Syria, they were the group that was ready, willing and able to fight. They tell us they lost around 11,000 of their fighters in those battles against ISIS, mostly young men and women. Now, Turkey regards that group, the SDF, as a terrorist organization, and for months, if not years, it's been saying that it needs a safe zone inside Syria to protect itself. It also wants to resettle some of the 3 million Syrians who are currently living in Turkey. But the SDF is saying, you know, America, we fought your war for you against ISIS. We feel betrayed. They're clearly furious.
I mean, and the Kurds just in general have this history with the U.S., you know, from the U.S. invasion in Iraq, and they've been such a presence for American forces and a reliable partner. It's pretty remarkable. I want to turn also, you know, we've heard Turkish President Erdogan say that their goal is really to wipe terror, establish a safe zone. But can you give us a sense of what exactly, Bulent, happens now?
Well, I think it's too early to call it an invasion. Clearly, there have been some airstrikes. I was watching live Turkish TV feed, and the expected ground incursion into what Erdogan hopes to be a safe zone under Turkish control has not yet been established. Look, there are 2 components to his plans. One is to push the YPG, which is the Syrian Kurdish component of the SDF, out of that area, maybe up to 30 kilometers deep, across the Turkish-Syrian border from the Euphrates to Iraq, and then to settle as much as 2 million of the Syrian refugees who are in Turkey. And that's a tremendous economic burden, but it's a massive undertaking. And even though the U.S. has, through Trump's phone call to Erdogan, has given the green light, as your correspondent said, to the initial part of the operation, the deeper they go in, there might be greater resistance from the U.S., in particular from the U.S. Congress.
And Holly, what's the sense from Syria? Have we heard from Syrian officials?
Yeah, so I think there are two big fears here when it comes to the broader impact here. One is that if the SDF is consumed with the fight against Turkey, that other players in Syria, the Syrian regime or their backers, Russia and Iran, capitalise on this to start, a war on another front and try and take territory off the Kurds, off the SDF further south in Syria. The other big concern is the ISIS prisoners that the SDF is holding. They didn't just beat ISIS on the battlefield. They say they're now holding around 12,000 accused ISIS fighters, including 4,500 foreigners, and there are camps full of ISIS wives and children. It's already a stretch for them to contain that many people. I think the nightmare scenario is that they simply no longer have the resources to do so, and there's a mass prison break, and then we see ISIS reforming its army of militants. And the worst case scenario there is that they then once again have the capacity to orchestrate or inspire terror attacks in Europe or the US.
Which is an incredibly grave threat. Bulent, I want to ask you, you've mentioned that the Kurds, they've been this critical force. But when you look at the fighters out, you take the fighters out of the picture in northern Syria, you see this opportunity for ISIS to come back, as Holly mentions. What does this do for military assault for other countries who are interested in the region? Holly mentioned Russia and Iran coming in. Is there any other country that these forces can now partner with to counter the Russian and Iranian threat?
Well, the Russians have brokered talks between the Syrian Kurdish YPG and the Syrian regime. They met in Damascus, I believe, in July. But it hasn't got anywhere because Assad was not willing to make any kind of concessions of the kind that the Kurds were looking for. In desperation, they may turn to Damascus, but there's no reason to believe that the Syrian government will, the Syrian regime of Assad, will give them what they haven't given so far. And secondly, the Russians seem to be cooperating, and to a lesser extent, the Iranians seem to be cooperating with Turkey in the so-called Astana process. There's a good relationship between President Putin and President Erdogan. Turkey's buying Russian missiles. So the Syrian Kurds do not have much of an alternative to the U.S., and the U.S. has let them down. But again, they find themselves in a predicament without too many allies.
Mm-hmm. And, President Trump vowed earlier this week to take action against Turkey if they try to do anything that he considers, in his words, off limits. Here's what he had to say.
Right now, we're at a position where if Turkey does anything out of what they should be doing, we will hit them so hard on the economy.
So, Holly, he said he'll hit the economy hard. Is there a sense that sanctions would work in this situation?
It's just such mixed messages. It's opening the door to Turkey. It's pulling those 50 US troops out of that area that the Turks are heading into and saying, we're essentially green-lighting this. And then it's saying, but if you go too far, we'll hit you with sanctions. But I think the problem for the US is it doesn't have good choices in the Middle East. If there was a good choice, we'd all know what it was and America would do it. That's what happened with the fight against ISIS. The US went looking for a partner. The SDF was the obvious choice, and it angered Turkey. But now America has angered both Turkey, which is, that's been an open wound for years, but also it's left the SDF, this Kurdish-dominated group, feeling betrayed. Mm-hmm.
And you wonder what the message is for years down the road. When you want to partner with another ally, they'll point to this situation no matter who's in the White House.
This is not just a message for the SDF. Other people in the region and the world beyond that are looking at this and extrapolating out from it.
Holly Williams and Bulent Aliriza, I want to thank you both very much for joining us.